an important interest to veterans, and I do find, at EarthX we find that the veterans cross all boundaries. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, you care about the people who have taken care of us, and thank you for that. And thank you, they said Rick Dobbin, we'll come back to Rick, but he's kind of a saint in my order. David, so you've kind of recently gone through something, serendipity, that's led you to particularly to be here tonight. Can you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, serendipity is a good word, because this last week has been pretty crazy, and just what has led me to be here just makes me believe in fate and how things are so intricately ordained, from above and to get us to be here. And so I had a brain injury 10 years ago, and 2 back-to-back actually. One was a bicycle, and one I got hit by a car. And that one act was definitely the thing that knocked me onto natural medicine and doing all the things that I do, most definitely. I was in chronic pain and anxiety, and no one else was going to help me, so I had to help heal myself. And I went from natural medicine away from pharmacy and the pharmaceuticals I was trained, and into functional medicine, soon realizing that natural medicine itself was just symptomatic. If you're not addressing the roots, the digestive dysfunction, and the toxicity, you're just playing, you go into the leaves that are browning, the branches that are weakening. You're not going to the root. And all this time, I'm still kind of what I realized about a month ago is that I was battling past brain injuries that I never really fully addressed. I didn't really want to recognize it because it's harder to treat. And so through this process, I've been diving deep into my own healing, and then just a couple of weeks ago, I got hit again, a third concussion to the exact same place. Metal poles to the head. And I just, have been feeling really bad. I'm in a lot of pain right now. I'm nauseous, and I don't feel I'm fully even here. But then after that, I got a call from Sarah, and she asked me to talk about medicinal mushrooms, and I was on a plane to Guatemala. I should have been on that plane already. I'm going tomorrow morning. Instead, I'm taking some time off just to rest and heal. But I'm so glad to be here, because I've been using medicinal mushrooms for my own healing just these last couple of weeks, these last months. And I've realized that trauma, there is physical trauma, and I'm using, of course, the lines maybe talked about that increases brain-derived neurotropic factor to help neurogenesis and nerve regrowth and repair. But then, I'm using psilocybin as well, because there's an energetic trauma from just getting hit in the head multiple times by cars and different things, and skateboarding all my life, that keeps me in this pain pattern. And finding, psilocybin in just small microdoses with psychotherapeutic processes and EFT and breathing and meditation and other ways to really just enhance this process of letting go of this energetic resonance of trauma in my system. So I think mushrooms really can save the world, and it's stories like this right here that show us the power of this medicine. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, I open up for questions. If you want to ask a question, if you would line up over here. And the other thing I'll say is we're not going anywhere, so we're going to be here all night. And I watch the film, and I feel like when I watch the movie, it's a little bit, Avatar, when I think of the connectivity of the planet, when I think about we're all together, and the fact that I think of the mushroom piece of it to be kind of like the skin, and that whether it's above or below the surface or the ground, but the fact that it mimics the brain, the fact that the connections of it are similar to what a computer could do, and that this is all evolved, it's all part of this evolution. So,
yeah, I really love these mushrooms, and psilocybin is one teacher, but there's so many other mushrooms as well that we went through that I just have to talk about them just a little bit. They're amazing and have miraculous properties as well. And so, they have so many different functions and so many medicinal uses from the research and from traditional use. But I like to break it down into just like a little metaphor of how, these mushrooms work to help, medicine. And I'm going to use something called the doctrine of signatures, which is from Paracelsus, an old herbalist kind of philosophy that says, the thing, the plant in its environment, its morphology, what it looks like, what it does, how it interacts with other things in its environment, tells us a lot, is a microcosm of the macrocosm of potentially the medicinal use it can have for humans as well. And so in that, there's lots of things and properties of mushrooms that tell us our other medicinal benefits, like the lion's mane that looks like the neurons with the axons coming down, We've talked a lot about that, but they're seeing in rat models that even amyloid plaques are able to be dissolved by these. And so that's the cause of Alzheimer's. That's huge. And so we're all declining in some way. To have some kind of vanguard of support there is amazing. And then too, there's insecticidal properties, right? We talked about that and saw that in the movie. But it's really amazing antiviral, especially reishi, for example. So, the way that it upregulates your immune system, it's upregulating this non-specific, innate immune system that's much, more old actually than our antibody system. It's much more specific. And so it can use these things called beta-glucans. These are these polysaccharides that these different mushrooms create. And the immune system sees that and it just upregulates all the functions of that endogenous function that's been trained over millennia and billions of years to do exactly that, to kill that pathogen. And that's so helpful because a lot of these, things that we're dealing with, they hide their beta-glucans, they can mimic and they're covert. And especially cancer cells, right? There is no beta-glucans in normal protein structures that you can find. And so when you have a mushroom that can upregulate the immune system at such a innate level, it's really, really helpful. And it's being used now in extract from Coriolus or Tokito mushroom is actually being used. It's called PSK in Japan. And it's the main chemotherapy adjunct right now that they're using, and it reduces a lot of the mortality by a huge percentage. So I think that is a good thing to point. The third thing is that it's the scaffolding of nature. And so we came from the seeds. Plant life wasn't able to come until fungi came, because they were the filamentous structure and core that allowed the algae to be able to create the energy from sunlight and from carbon to feed the fungus, but then the fungus could translate it to the rest of the organism. And so the same way, in all of our microbiomes, which is the newest research area of research right now, it's the center of everything, we have these biofilms. These biofilms are accumulations of fungus and bacteria and different microbes. And that's been shown that these fungal scaffoldings can choose, and promote good bacteria, inhibit bad bacteria, and they kind of help, give order to the structure. And those biofilms can be really bad too, and they can, with a lot of the antibiotics and all the alcohol and carbs and sugars we eat. A lot of us have fungal overgrowth in one way or another, and it's getting worse and worse. And I see personally that this is a major, major issue and reason for chronic conditions disease. It just creates a lot of damage in the gut, creates tons of inflammation, and then we have intestinal permeability, and the food particles and microbes keep on coming in. And that is the main source of inflammation in the body. System just freaks out. And so you have it there, you have it in the brain as well, and it affects all the other systems. And so fungal overgrowth, is a thing that we want to keep in mind too. They can be bad. The last thing is just, going back to psilocybin, they're there to decay, to transmute those things that are no longer needed now, to be able to compost them for use for something better. And just there's so much research on the effects of psilocybin and MDMA and other psychedelics for trauma and just repatterning things, and
it decays and breaks down the trauma as well as rocks and plants and everything else.
Exactly. And one thing I want to point out is just with microdosing, I think that this is an amazing thing we haven't touched upon. And I think this is really important because 38% of participants that went through those studies, they say that it was one of the 5 top challenging experiences of their life. So yes, it was probably the most important, but it was also the most challenging for 38%. And so that's pretty high. So I bet a lot of people aren't open and ready to go on a full therapeutic dose and journey in that way potentially. So how many people are missing out on the potential benefits? But if you're able to do it at sub-hallucinogenic, sub-perceptual doses that don't change any kind of perception of reality, you just feel a little more creative, a little more connected to self, a little more in yourself, in your flow, and maybe, even really how I like to, there's this place of equanimity you get in meditation where you're able to just see things happen and maybe not react as much. And maybe just a microsecond more, but when you're on a microdose, you can kind of have that moment to choose for yourself, and instead of going into that reactive trigger, that trauma response, that whatever it is that no longer serves you. And so for addiction, and so with cigarettes, there's a huge 80%, instead of, I think it's 30%, and that's venlafaxine or venlafaxine, that's the top drug for that right now. It's a huge increase.
I still smoke, it doesn't work.
Not judging. But yeah, I just wanted to share some of those amazing other uses of medicinal mushrooms too. Thank you for letting me share.
Well, and real quick, speaking of since you brought up microdosing, especially psilocybin.
We'll talk about this all night.
Hey, I gotta get on a plane at 8 a.m. in the morning. As long as I make that, I'm good. I'll stay here all night. But
I want to answer that first, maybe just metaphorically a little bit with one study. And so this is a study done in psychedelics in the 60s, and they showed people just a convex face. That's what we're used to seeing when we look at someone. But they showed it to people as a concave face. And they noticed how many people were actually able to recognize that it was concave versus convex. Pretty simple. But 8 out of 10 times, on a normal state of consciousness, you're just going to say that's a convex space. But then, people that were on these psychedelics, almost a whole majority, 8 out of 10, were actually able to see that it was concave. And so I think a lot of times these psychedelics bring us out of the patterning of the ego that we develop to defend ourselves, but also just to save RAM and memory and energy, because you don't want to think about every decision every time you could do anything. But sometimes these things don't serve you, and it's able to really, take us out of that, to zoom out a little bit, to have some perspective and realize maybe some of these things are not beneficial for me, and I can let them go. So that's kind of more on the metaphorical side, but how psilocybin and a lot of these psychedelics actually act is on something called the 5-HT2A receptor, and that's a serotonin receptor subtype. And psilocybin is just the breakdown product of that. The active molecule is called psilocin, and it almost looks exactly like serotonin. It's about 2 methyl groups different, hydroxy different, and that's why it acts on that receptor. But that receptor is mostly in the cortical higher areas of thought, actually. That's where most of that receptor activity is. And so it's able to go to those places, and it creates neurogenesis and neuro repatterning of actually the brain and growth and repair. So, the psilocybin research is actually beyond lion's mane, actually, in the ability to increase neurogenesis and neuroregeneration. They did a compared study to actually brain-derived neurotropic factor and the neurogrowth factor. These are the neurotropins that help us actually rebalance that and repair those things.
My question will start with you, David, is there's the pros and cons. How do you do this right? How do you, if you're going to use these sort of techniques, use it correctly? How do you introduce it to your life the right way?
Yeah, so that question could go into 2 different areas. If we were talking about more on the psilocybin side, that would be different because it's not legal, and there's obtaining, and there's dosage, and there's being with someone that's experienced and having a good intention set and setting, right?
Experience is important, especially when you're talking about mushrooms. Like they said in the movie, there's mushrooms out there that will kill you. There's mushrooms out there that you can put beef stroganoff and it just tastes amazing. And then there's other mushrooms that can help expand your mind, heal trauma. And this is where, whatever psychedelic you choose, have someone who knows what they're doing involved in some way. Because the last thing I want is for somebody here to go pick a mushroom thinking, hey, this is going to be awesome, eat it and die. So I do think what you were saying, having people who have experience, who know what they're doing is critically important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, but somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and so, on the more medicinal mushroom side, I think we've been talking a lot about psilocybin, but I do think, I've been inspired after watching this movie on all the amazing ways that can help our earth, but also our human bodies and minds as well. And so, it's important to practically be able to implement some of this just into your life to get those benefits. So if you want to implement that in a safe way, You know, but a lot of times capsules are the best way if you're trying to regularly heal a brain injury, if you're trying to deal with something more severe. So you get that regular dosage on a regular interval. You want standardized extracts. You can see, you know, exactly the compound that's standardized too. And usually hot water extracts are a little better, or combined, maybe a double extraction. So there's places like Terrasol, which is local. They're in Fort Worth actually, and they sell a lot of these mushrooms just dried and for really good pricing. So I just suggest you to look at some of those things, check them out, and those have been implemented into your elixirs, into making a little reishi latte at night. You can make a peppermint lion's mane, you know, for the morning, and start implementing into your soups and other, you know, cacao drinks instead of a coffee, for example. But then you can also just eat your medicine. You know, shiitake, maitake, and oyster mushrooms, they taste delicious. They have a lot of protein content. They taste like steaks in a lot of ways. And, you know, they're dried, and you can have them at home and have them around at any time and just rehydrate them and put them in whatever you're eating. And there's so much research with those, and just lowering cholesterol, lowering, you know, a lot of the diabetes and high glucose symptoms as well. A lot of the cardiometabolics. Those are great.
You're not leaving, so you're going to be around to have a conversation. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to, you know, why are we here, and why is this so important for this time? And we have a lot of trials and tribulations upon us in these coming generations that we're going to live through. And, you know, are we part of the change that spins it around or not? And these medicinal mushrooms really just show us how much, you know, many blessings we have in the natural world, with plants as well, as advanced nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, and how we're using them these days, and new technologies and eco. And so I think that there's a lot ahead of us, but we have so much potential and so many tools. It's really just about us simply collectively waking up.
Because I will have to wrap it up because I want us to go in, but essentially, you're microdosing with the best of fest right now because you're not getting the full film festival, but you're getting the small piece of it. So what I want to ask for all of you to do is to come all weekend. We're going to have films starting at 11:30 tomorrow morning at the Alamo Draft House, Schwartz Block with Pegasus. We've got films all weekend, and this is what you're going to get. You're also going to get a lot of people there from the movies and people involved with the films, because that's what makes it special, is to see them and to be able to interact and basically learn more beyond even the context of the film. So I want you to thank both David and Jonathan. They're not leaving, so come outside, and there's pizzas that have all just arrived. There's a fire truck in the alley, and then Bart Weiss is VJing, and we're so grateful you guys came tonight. We look forward to seeing you again. Give them a big round of applause.